Okay, let's get started. So, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Stuart Scott. I'm the AWS and Security Content Lead here at Cloud Academy. And today we shall be focusing on how the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting cloud availability and what we can learn from it. Now, before I go any further, I just want to say that I hope you and your family are staying safe in these unprecedented times of the COVID-19 virus. I'm sure it's affected us all in different ways, and we've all shared our struggles, despair, grief, but also the thankfulness and kindness that we've seen. So let us all just look forward to brighter times ahead. So back to the topic in hand. As we've seen, the world has been turned upside down with the social restrictions and remote working, which has put a tremendous strain on businesses and how they operate. Now, many organizations have had to look for alternate ways to run their services to support their business through these times, and that has put pressure upon the resources being utilized within the cloud, as we shall discuss going forward in this webinar. Now, on the panel with me here today, I have Zev Schonberg, a product specialist at Spot. So, hello, Zev, and thank you very much for joining me on this call.
Hey, thank you, Stuart. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to say today about the COVID-19 virus and how it has affected, in particular, the compute resources in the cloud, and also some of the reasons behind it. But before I hand the reins over to you, I just want to let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded, and you will all receive a link to it as soon as it's being published within the next few days. So let's get straight to it, Zev. If you can run through the agenda of topics for us today, that'd be great.
Absolutely. And of course, Stuart, thank you very much for the introduction. And if there are any issues, as many of you probably are as well, I am working from home today. So if there are any internet issues or you can't hear me, please do let me know and I will be happy to repeat myself. So we're going to be looking at, as Stuart mentioned, how COVID-19 is impacting the digital world. We're going to take a kind of broader view, something which you probably are all familiar with already on some level. Then we're going to dive into the specifics of cloud compute usage during this period and the financial ramifications of that. We're going to go a little bit deeper into spot instance markets, how AWS interruptions are potentially affecting availability for the various businesses that are running on AWS. And finally, I'm not going to take up too much time on this, but how Spot.io can help with running on Spot instances with full availability. So of course, this is a Q&A. I just forgot the last bullet there, but yes, there are questions, and I believe that you are able to ask questions right now during chat, through the chat, and we'll be collecting those and answering them at the end of the session.
Yes, thanks for pointing that out, Zev. There is a chat section, so please do feel free to post any questions, and we'll get to as many of those as we can at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. So Zoom, we're not on Zoom today, surprise, surprise. But for many of us, we're with the competition, the original go-to webinar. But for many of us, myself included, Zoom has literally become an integral way that we work, how our kids are going to school these days. All of my kids are doing Zoom classes. And even I admit I have played some games with my friends via Zoom. So I'm using it for a lot of different things in my life, and I'm sure everyone else is as well. What we're seeing is an unprecedented 3,000%, almost 3,000% increase in the amount of daily Zoom users.
That's
now,
crazy.
This is not, yeah, it's really crazy. I think there may be other companies out there that are experiencing it, but I think Zoom is definitely the most notable. That's why I started with it. But they're not alone. In general, the internet has seen up to 70% increases in some areas, particularly hard-hit areas with like strict stay-at-home orders. And but just globally though, if you take all the areas collectively, we're looking at about 50% increases in internet usage. Now, fortunately, the internet has been very resilient. We might experience some delays occasionally, but overall things are fine. I'm not going to focus today at all on the ISPs, how they're handling the increased traffic. You may have even heard that some governments asked the likes of YouTube and Netflix and other content providers, streaming content providers, to reduce the streaming quality to lighten the load. Apparently that has worked, and we're still getting our Netflix, we're still getting everything that we need. And it's, there may be some delays. My kids are like, what the heck, this is taking forever. But overall, it's pretty good. So now what we're going to really be focusing on is the beyond the internet, the ISPs, but what's really going on beyond that from the cloud perspective. So all the logos that you see here, and probably millions of other companies out there that are not on this slide, are using the cloud. They're running their applications, they're running their services on the big three, on Amazon, AWS, on Azure, and on Google Cloud. So we're going to be focusing primarily on AWS, on Amazon for this presentation. They are definitely still the biggest player in the cloud, and we have, I'll just admit it here, most of our customers are still from Amazon. But the trends and the information that we're going to see can be safely assumed to be quite similar amongst all the other cloud providers as well.
So just a quick question, Zev.
Sure.
Have you heard of or seen any evidence of the cloud providers struggling with this increased demand at all?
So, I mean, I have read reports. I read reports that Azure was having issues. That was like a month ago. And I think AWS actually did experience some sort of outage a couple of weeks back. I don't know if that was even related to COVID-19, but overall, the cloud providers are holding up. They're doing amazing. There is, things are running in the cloud, and people are not getting turned away at the door, so to speak. The focus, though, of what we're going to be talking about is how the increased usage has created a certain pressure, a certain, I don't want to even call it a strain, but it's a certain pressure on the available computing resources, as we'll see shortly.
Sure. Cheers.
Yeah. So this slide is really just for the folks that are like, come on, we know there are so many industries that have completely plummeted, and the sporting, there's no more sporting events that are being watched or streamed on the internet. Real estate, travel, things of that nature, they're completely tanked, and traffic has dropped. Yeah, it's true. All those things have completely gone, towards the negative levels of usage. But as this is actually, I got this from Cloudflare. There's a fantastic graph. You can see that the areas, children, education, entertainment, all of these have had dramatic increases in traffic and usage, up to 200% in some areas, and that has definitely offset and outweighed any of the drops in some of the other industries. So overall, we're seeing a massive net increase in internet consumption.
And that graph kind of backs up your previous slide as well, with your Netflixes and your Disney Plus, when you talk about like entertainment and kids. So
yeah, exactly. Video game. We're gonna be touching on some gaming companies. So that's where we are now. I want to go beyond the internet traffic. We focused on that quite a bit. Now I want to go to the home of where all these websites and applications actually live, and that's in the cloud. So what we're looking at over here is cloud usage, EC2, Elastic Cloud Compute from Amazon specifically, for a leading in-app video game, a video platform company. So these guys, they primarily operate in the video game industry, and they're delivering advertisements in-app. So someone who's playing a video game, he'll potentially see a video, an ad at some point, etc. That's what they're doing. And of course, as gaming has been increasing tremendously, I don't have numbers off the top of my head over here, and I didn't research them, but video games have consumption, online gaming has tremendously gone up during this period, and with that, so did the advertisements. So you can see over here, they've had a 40% increase in the average. This is just one of their accounts that we're looking at. They've had a 40% increase in how many EC2 instances they're using, from about 800 to 1,300 on a daily basis, or on the period that this is being tracked. So now if you consider this is just one company, and they're an average size company, this is just one example that we're looking at. If you consider this is happening across the board in so many, as we've seen before on the previous slides, so many different companies, so many different industries are experiencing massive, massive growth in terms of their users and usage. We can only, extrapolate from there that there's tremendous pressure on the available compute resources. I also want to point out that our main businesses, we're running applications, we're helping companies run on spot instances. So what we're looking at here, these 13, when I highlighted 1301, those are primarily, I'd say about like 80% of those are spot instances. So you have to also realize that we'll get into this later, there are other types of pricing models. There's on demand, there's reserved instances, savings plans, all that. So the whole universe of compute instances is being used, and there's a lot of pressure on it overall, and that's definitely making a major impact.
Sorry, Zev,
So
just before you carry on, just in a couple of sentences, can you just explain where the availability of these spot instances come from, just in case people are fairly new to spot as a whole?
Sure, absolutely. I'm actually going to cover it again in a couple of slides. Okay. But that's fine. But just so you know, so you have the general concept of compute virtual machines, these EC2 instances, and essentially Amazon has to always be, and all cloud providers for that matter, they always have to be ready. They always have to have spare capacity in the event that there is a surge in demand, like we're seeing today. Now, during quiet periods, when those instances are not being used, when there is no demand for them, you literally have football fields or buildings, skyscrapers or whatever. You have these massive, massive data centers with racks and racks and racks of virtual machines that are sitting idle. And maintaining these data centers is very expensive. Building them is very expensive. So on the one hand, Amazon and all the cloud providers absolutely must have spare capacity. But on the other hand, because just in case there's a surge in demand, they can't leave their customers high and dry. But on the other hand, they're expensive, and they got to figure out a way to somehow capitalize on that. So what they do is, and all the cloud providers do this in some way, shape, or form. But for Amazon, they've created a concept, a pricing construct called spot instances. And essentially, they're saying you can use these instances, and they're exactly the same, exact same virtual instance, the same CPU, same memory, same specs as any, as they should be. The only difference is that you're going to pay potentially 90% less than the list price or the on-demand price, with the caveat that Amazon can come in and pull the plug at any point in time, to supply, because just imagine these are low priced, they're not getting full price. So if someone who already paid for an instance or is willing to pay full price for an instance, Amazon will take the instance away from you and give it to somebody else who's willing to pay or who is paying the full price or the reserve price. So that, again, there's a lot more to it. I'm just kind of give the high level. So they're really cheap. Just in short, they're super, super cheap, super inexpensive, but there is a lot of potential instability with spot instances. Okay, so was that helpful?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. So you may be wondering, why am I just going on and on about this volatility? Everyone knows things are crazy. Why is this relevant for us? So the first reason is, the first point is that yes, the ISPs are doing a great job. Like we mentioned before, the cloud providers are doing a great job. You're able to get compute, no problem. But who's going to pay for it? So, for example, these 290 million Zoom users that started using Zoom, including my kids and their schools, who are probably using free licenses. How many of them are actually paying? I don't know the numbers. Zoom hasn't revealed that yet, but I just anecdotally, my guess is that a lot, maybe half, maybe more than half, are not yet paying customers. They may become paying customers, but today they are not. They just started, this whole thing just started, and a month and a half ago, when this whole thing was getting started and everyone was running to Zoom, certainly nobody was paying for those free accounts. So how did Zoom pay for all those servers? Out of their own pocket. It was very expensive. Same thing for Netflix, although when I prepared this slide, I actually saw, there was a 16% increase in Netflix usage. The data wasn't in yet on how much, how many of those, how much of that usage actually reflected paying customers. I knew that what it reflected for me personally. I have an account I pay every single month. I'm paying the exact same amount that I paid, 3 months ago or 4 months ago, but I'm not gonna tell you how much, but I definitely am watching much more Netflix than I used to, and so is my wife, and so are my kids.
Yeah, my kids certainly have.
That Netflix had to service all of that increase in usage, which did not necessarily represent an increase in revenue. Now, one of my colleagues just pointed out, literally 5 minutes before this session, that the reportings are that Netflix just signed up 17 million new paying users. So if he was correct, I didn't actually see the report myself, but if he's correct, so then Netflix is doing okay. But there are so many companies out there who are seeing an increase in traffic and usage, which does not represent an increase in revenue. The last example I gave over here are many publishers, Facebook for sure, Google for sure, the ad traffic, ads are dropping like crazy. There's so many localized newspapers, news sites. People are now turning more and more to their hometown news outlet because they want to know, what happened. Who is that guy running down the street without a mask? Did he get arrested? Did he not get arrested? Everyone wants to know how many outbreaks were there in their locale. So these local small sites are getting tons of visitors, which means that they have to support those visitors with more servers. But guess what? Businesses are closed. Advertising is down. So no one is paying, or I shouldn't say no one, but there is not commensurate revenue with the increase in traffic. So that's point number one. Now, I'm just going to, before I get to the second point, you probably are getting a sense of where we're headed over here. We're talking about cost. We're looking at that financial impact of COVID-19 on cloud consumption. So if we're going to be tackling cloud costs, we want to start with the big stuff. The big stuff really, there's obviously, you can focus on storage and network and a lot of other different cloud services, and all those can be optimized and they should be optimized. And that's a separate discussion about how that can be done. But the bottom line is there's less financial savings, there's less impact in those areas, and there are less options to play with. EC2, on the other hand, which is Amazon's cloud compute, still comprises a mass. I remember in 2012, 2013, I was doing some research into this. EC2 was 80% of all spend in Amazon. Okay, there were less services back then. Serverless, I don't know if it even existed or if it was in its infancy. But we're talking about so today, it's still in 2019, it's still a very it is the majority of spend is still on compute. So that's going to obviously break down to each and every company that's out there using Amazon. Most of your spend is no doubt going to be on EC2. So let's focus on the big stuff. And finally, I think again, obviously this everything's relative, but compute is definitely probably the most affected by the volatility. The tremendous surge in demand. Obviously, there's network traffic and increases in the bandwidth over there as well. But compute, there's a finite amount of computer servers in the world, and with demand increasing, it's the one that's being affected the most by volatility. So this is where actually I fast forwarded before to this slide. I wanted to just cover some basics before we get to our second point of what the issue with volatility is for our webinar today. But just again, I'll just run through this one more time because we have it now on the screen. We can all see it. So you essentially have for EC2 three main pricing models, or three options of how you can pay and consume these compute resources. Number one is on-demand instances. This is a pay-as-you-go model. It's very flexible. You can scale up, spin up instances, take down instances at will, but obviously you're paying full price. And with time, it gets extremely, extremely expensive. The next option is long-term reserved capacity. This represents reserved instances, and there are a lot of different types of reserved instances. You have 1 year, you have 3 year, you have flexible, regional, all these different types of flavors that you can play with. You also have savings plans, which was recently introduced, I think, in November, December timeframe last year, which is again a similar concept of to reserved capacity. You're essentially committing, in both cases, you're committing to either 1 or 3 year packages that you're going to be, either paying upfront or you're committing to pay over the 12-month to 36-month period. And while you could get up to 50 and even 70% savings depending on the types of reserved capacity that you select, you're locked in. You don't have flexibility anymore. You basically, if something goes wrong and a project ends or business goes south and you don't need so many servers, you're still going to pay for those servers for the full 1 or 3 years. Yes, you could offload them in the market potentially, at least for the reservations, reserved instances, but it's very hard. It's not so easy. There's not so much liquidity. So you're pretty much locked in. So which brings us to the third option, which are spot instances. So these give us, on average, we're seeing here with our customers 75% savings and very often up to 90% savings. So that is actually 90% is the most that you could actually save with spot instances. That's typically for older generations of EC2 instances, but even for the newer generations, you're seeing up to 85% discounting on the on-demand pricing.
And so are you seeing a spike in usage for spot instances with a particular EC2 family type?
So that's a good question. I didn't really research it that much. I was looking more on the regional and data center level to see what that was like. But I'm actually in the process of writing a spot, a white paper on that topic. And what we have seen, not related to COVID-19, but we have been seeing the C5 4X large. We've seen about a 200% increase in that particular instance type since last year. I don't recall which region or availability zone it was. It probably, my guess is it was primarily in US East 1. We also have seen the M5 general compute and the R5 memory focused instance families are seeing a big increase. For like graphics intensive workloads, I happen to recall that the G4 D9 X large is one of the prominent ones. It's a relatively new instance, and as soon as it came out, we started to see a lot of adoption for that particular instance. For I'm assuming it's most of the workloads are probably machine learning or gaming kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you.
Sure. So
sorry,
coming back over
your stride there.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's fine. It's fine. So back to our the options over here. These are options clearly in a time of uncertainty, of volatility, when business is not necessarily great, or even if it's booming, but no one is necessarily you have tremendous traffic, but no one's necessarily paying for it for the increase in traffic. Spot instances look extremely, extremely attractive. Again, we're going to leave aside the aspect. I know I mentioned before that spot instances represent the spare capacity, the buffer that Amazon has, and there is that caveat that they can pull the plug at any given time and give it to someone who has long-term capacity, reserve capacity, or on demand, because they're obviously paying more. But leaving the availability and the stability issue aside, from a financial perspective, this is definitely the way to go. You don't have any lock-in. You're not committing to 1 year or 3 years. It's literally just day by day, minute by minute, and they're super affordable.
And when you say pull the plug, is it still a 2-minute warning?
Yes, yeah, of course. Yeah, so none of that shit. And I want to stress, I mean, because you touched upon this, are the cloud vendors showing any, signs of wear and tear? The answer is absolutely not. Amazon is a beast. They, you cannot see them breaking a sweat. So, they provide 2 minutes, and that is like, ironclad rule. It's not getting shorter, but it still is 2 minutes. So 2 minutes is not a heck of a lot of time to drain your instance and relaunch a new one and move the workload and all that. So there's definitely that challenge. But the point that I'm getting to, why am I harping on and on about the volatility? It's because of the massive increase in overall demand for all EC2, for on demand, for reserve capacity, and for spot instances. All of that is creating much greater volatility in this spot instance area. And it's so desirable, but at the same time, if you thought it was, quote unquote, unstable before, it's got even crazier today. So that brings me to the next point. And here we're actually going to take a look now for the next couple of slides, exactly what's going on. What has all of this volatility done to the spot instance market? So what you're looking at over here is, these are actually AWS interruptions. Amazon will go ahead, like we mentioned, they give you a 2-minute warning. And when they need that instance for someone who has either on demand or reserved, they're going to give it to them. We call them replacements because we never just leave an instance that's, a spot instance that's been interrupted as is. We will always, in all circumstances, replace it. And we'll get into that a little bit later on, although quite briefly. But the point over here is that you can see replacements for most of the Amazon regions. I think there are 24 today. I think this is about 13 or 14 of them. It's most of the major ones. And you can see over here, things are going great. It's June 2019, July, August, September. And then around October, we start to see increase in interruptions. Again, there's pressure on the market. This is very normal. People have begun their holiday research. They're looking where to get the best deal on whatever they're buying for the holiday season. So we're starting to see, and McKinsey, by the way, they have a report that shows that the spike in internet traffic actually occurs well before the holiday season. People are doing their homework, but it continues. You still have elevated usage all throughout the holidays, and then as we get to Christmas and New Year's, it drops, as it should, and it's quiet and it's pretty low. But this year, things went crazy starting in February, and as you can see, even though you're seeing over here this orangish, yellowish, line, that's representing one of the more popular, one of the older regions. But you can see the dramatic volatility, the dramatic level of interruptions that's occurring over here for spot instances. But it is occurring if you look down at the bottom at the smaller little peaks over here in the different colors. You can see that there are replacements and there's more elevated levels of interruptions occurring in pretty much in all of the regions. I would have to zoom in, and I'm not able to do that right now, but I can just tell you, if you zoom into any one of those regions, you will see the exact same level, the exact same pattern in all regions. So that's pretty much the level of interruptions and replacements. It's really dwarfing what we're seeing now during COVID-19 is dwarfing what happens during a regular cyclical holiday season.
That's definitely a big jump there.
Yep. So now, moving on, what we're looking at, this is a kind of psychedelic graph over here. I originally thought I was just making this the whole screen, but I realized that people might have seizures, so I decided not to do that. We're looking at the different spot instance markets, and we're trying to track the longevity. Longevity is the flip side of the interruptions. In other words, you have spot instances that are interrupted immediately, and then you have some that live long, healthy lives. That could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It could also be a couple of months. So we're looking to see which one of these spot instance markets live the longest. Now, what exactly are these spot instance markets? So a spot instance market is comprised of four things: the instance family, right? So that would be the M5 or the C5. Then it would be the size, right? You can have an X large, 2X large, 4X large, and then you have the region. So it could be, US East 1, US East 2, it could be EU 1, EU 2, it could be, SA 1, so on and so forth. So you have the regions, and then within each region, you have different availability zones, anywhere from 3 to 6, I believe. I think at a minimum, each one has 3 availability zones, and I think US East 1 has, I think, 6 availability zones. So now each of these combine into a unique spot instance market. And what we're looking at here is the behavior. The behavior is going to be unique in each of these markets. The level of interruptions is going to be unique, and it's constantly changing. So I'm not even sure what this blue, I can't see, but it's one of the instance types and one of the regions. Let's take this light blue bar, which represents a specific spot instance market. You could see that back in December, it had very low level of interruptions. But then if I fast forward to some point in January, around January 27th, I can see that this light blue bar has expanded tremendously, meaning that it now has a much higher level of interruptions. And you can see that as we go, if you follow sometimes little, sometimes large blue bar, it is fluctuating. There's constant change in that. So getting a little bit more granular, a little bit more practical, down to earth. So, and this I think will also help bring home the point I was trying to make in the previous slide. Here we're looking at a C5 2X large, and I'm just showing data over here. We're looking at it in US East 1, and I'm only showing the data for 2 out of the 6 zones. I'm looking at availability zone 1 and availability zone number 6. Okay, so that way, because otherwise it would get too psychedelic and you would be able to follow. We're talking about the exact same instance in the exact same region, 2 different data centers, right? Each availability zone is supposedly, we know what's going on. As a regular user, you don't have visibility into that typically to know which data center, what you're getting exactly. But there are 6. All you need to know for this slide, there are 6 availability zones, and they all have very different levels of interruption. So one of them, US, VPC1, availability zone number 1, has extremely high levels of interruptions. That's the green spikes. And then this orangish reddish one, which is availability zone number 6, has practically no interruptions at all. So, you want to be aware that these markets don't all operate, they don't all march to the same band. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, sure.
Out of curiosity, does AWS have the same compute resources available in each AZ, or could one AZ have more than one family instance type than another? And is that one of the reasons why we could see the difference in behavior?
Yeah, I mean, so Amazon is inscrutable. We don't ever, to a level, but yes, that's definitely those are absolutely correct facts. Each AZ has different amounts of bare metal, of different amounts of servers. Amazon is, by the way, is constantly adding more and more racks of servers, but still there are tremendous differences from region to region, and even within a region, different availability zones. And obviously that's going to impact the supply and the availability for each instance type and size. What I meant by inscrutable is that we don't really know, we don't know. I mean, we know at Spot.io we actually see that, but Amazon will actually randomize the availability zone assignment. So when you're coming in, when you're as a customer, and you're trying to figure out, let me place my loads on different availability zones, you don't really know exactly which data center those loads are going to.
Yeah.
So it is kind of hard to see that. We are actually plugged into that, and we do see, and that's why we're able to see that. What I'm sharing with you now these are reflecting the actual levels of replacements down to the VPC. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
So moving along, I pretty much have covered some of the, some of the main points that I wanted to touch upon. We're experiencing, I hate using the word unprecedented, but it's pretty much unprecedented demand for EC2 in the cloud because of COVID-19. And someone's got to pay for that. Again, every company is different, but I think it's fair to say that for a large amount of businesses, this is a tough time. And whether you're getting the increase in traffic or you're experiencing the exact opposite and there's a massive slump in your business, cost is an issue. You want to figure out the best way to tackle your, you can't shut your servers down, you can't shut your business down, but you want to cut costs. Spot instances, definitely that is the way to go. That will provide the greatest cost relief. However, the increased demand for EC2 has made it much more challenging to use spot instances, especially if you're going to be doing it, especially if you're doing it yourself, DIY. It's going to be tough. It's going to be much tougher than ever before. We touched upon how each spot instance market has its own behavior in terms of longevity and so on and so forth. Now, there's some other points. I'm just, there's a whole long list, not for today. But if you're considering using spot instances, there's so many things you have to be aware of. Obviously, there are going to be interruptions. That is a fact of life when you're working with spot instances. So you have to think about how you're going to be able to drain those instances with a 2-minute notification, and then relaunch them, relaunch a new instance, transferring all the workload to that new instance. Spot instances are great, but even our biggest, among our customers, I mentioned before, there was a gaming company, and we're going to mention them again in a few minutes. They, I'd say about 80% of their workload is running on spot instances, which is tremendous, but they still use on demand, and they still use some level of reserved instances. And some of our customers use more, it could be a 60-40 breakdown using reserved instances and things of that nature. So you want to be, and the nice thing about that potentially is that you want to be able to play with the different pricing models all within a single environment, all within potentially even within a single cluster. So you have to think about how are you going to do that. It's not an easy feat. It's not out of the box. If you're running containerized workloads or Kubernetes, so there are going to be unique scaling and sizing issues that you're going to have to deal with. That again take on a new dimension when you're running on spot instances. If you have stateful applications, so you can, guess what? You can actually run stateful applications and workloads on spot instances, but you want to make sure that your data and your IP is persistent. So that's another thing that you have to take into consideration. So just to kind of give a little bit more of some live examples. I'm not going to share the names. I would love to, trust me, I would love to share the names here. But a tale of two companies. So one of them, the first one, is a company that was not a Spot.io customer. Today, they are deep into many thousand instance or node POC with us. But before that, they were running their staging environment on spot instances on their own, and they were using a couple of, I think it was 2 or 3 different instance types. They got very comfortable. Those particular instances that they found were quite stable enough for their staging environment. They never really built up the confidence in spot instances to actually bring it over to their production environment because they knew that they were kind of playing around. And but things were okay. And then along came COVID-19 and literally wiped out their entire staging environment. And they're like, uh-oh, we can't, even though it's a staging environment, we cannot operate like this. So we're talking to them, and they right now are running several thousand nodes in a trial on one of our products. So that's one story, and I'm sure it's happening because, and it makes perfect sense because up until now, things may or may not have been stable in the spot instance market. Yeah, there is a threat. There was a potential threat of interruptions, but it wasn't happening. But as soon as COVID-19 hit and the pressure went up on the market, as we saw before with those spikes, the interruptions began, to happen much more frequently.
To take out an entire environment is huge.
Yeah, I'm talking about an environment with like thousands of instances, and Okay, I'm not, no comment. Um, so, by the way, it could be any company. You can imagine whoever you want as the leading sports apparel company. The next company is an in-app video platform. These guys, I mentioned them before. They specialize in video game ads. They've been a customer for several years. As soon as gaming increased, they all of a sudden ads started getting delivered at a much higher level, and they needed to scale up 40% increase in their ECT usage since February. Now, what's amazing is that they saved in the last 3 months $1.5 million on their EC2 spend. It's a lot of money. But what's
Wow.
amazing is that more than a third occurred just in March, when they had the biggest spike in consumption. So those are the companies, and this really brings us to, I'm almost at the end, guys. We're just wrapping up. Some of the things that we've seen today are that COVID-19 has created a reality for spot instance markets very similar and maybe even more exaggerated than the holiday season trends. Knowing today, like we saw with this company that was doing it on their own, knowing today or yesterday or the day before that things were okay with spot instances means absolutely nothing. It doesn't help you to predict, if what's going to happen tomorrow, and certainly not even in 2 hours. Things are constantly changing. There's no way to be certain that your spot instance is that's here today is going to be here tomorrow. And the last thing that we try to emphasize is that there are so many different spot instance markets, and all of them are moving in different cycles at different times. So obviously, it's going to be kind of hard to manage all that, to keep your eye on all the different potential spot instance markets, all the different areas that you could move your workload safely and securely. Getting a sense of having visibility into when things are going to shift. It's very hard. That's what we specialize in. So when you run with us, it's a little bit different. My final slide, I think, really where this is not about Spot.io. Just wanted to give you a sense of what's happening in the market, but where can we help to make things better? So and I'm going to try to focus on this from to help you understand what we're actually doing. Number one, we have a tremendous amount of data. We're working with thousands of AWS and other cloud providers, but I'm focusing right now on AWS, thousands of customers. So we see the trends. We're able to see what's going on in all the markets all the time. And we're plugged in directly as well to Amazon itself, to all the different markets, and we're constantly monitoring everything. So having all of that broader data set gives us a distinct advantage of being able to see where things are moving. That allows us not only to select instances that have the greatest potential for longevity, for long longevity, it also gives us a lot of insight into when things could go south, and allows us to act proactively and move your instances off, move your workloads off an instance that we believe is slated for interruption well before the 2-minute notification. Additionally, we're able to just take your workload, particularly if you're running containerized workloads. It doesn't really matter. The instance size, the instance family doesn't always matter. We can, as long as you're we're meeting your requirements for for CPU and memory, we're able to see the broader picture and move your workload to where it needs to get. The last point about where we're able to really add a lot of value is I mentioned the 3 different pricing models: on demand, reserved capacity, and spot instances. You want all of these to play nicely together. In the event that you have reserved capacity, you have reserved instances. So we're able to very easily prioritize workloads. We're not going to go and even consider spinning up spot instances if you already have available unused reservations. On the flip side, if you're already running on spot instances and there's an interruption, and we'll be able to find you a better spot instance, or we'll fall back to on demand. And when the spot instance that you want becomes available again, we'll move you right back from the on demand to the spot instance. So we're constantly ensuring that you have a very nice blend, a very well balanced blend of all the pricing models to maximize availability with incredible cost savings. So that's really it for me. I'm gonna, pass it back to you, Stuart, and I guess we could take questions at this point. Let's see where we
Yeah,
go from there.
sure. I've just got a quick question myself. From a forecasting perspective, do you envisage that there will also be a spike in the number of reserved instances being purchased due to the likelihood of business as usual globally will not be for quite some time yet? So from a cost standpoint, could this be a better and more reliable option for some workloads at least?
Yeah, I mean, listen, no, by the way, Spot.io, we don't just deal with spot instances. We actually have one of our product lines is called Eco, and it specializes in management and automation for reserved portfolios, for reserved instances, for savings plans, etc. So I still think that for this time period, most businesses are probably opting for less lock-in. Reservations and savings plans can be a little bit scary, particularly if you don't know what the next year to 3 years holds for you. I think it's going to be weaker. That said, if you're a strong business, and certainly for our customers that know that their business is not going anywhere, they're going to be around, they're not being impacted, although everyone is being impacted, they will continue, renewing reservations and buying reservations as needed. But I think overall, I don't have any data to back this up, but my gut feeling, my sense is, from what I've heard internally, is that it's definitely not a bull market for reserved instances.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, well, that's a great presentation, Zev. A lot of information there. We've had some questions come in. If we can just ask a few questions just before we close up the webinar. The first question, based on your definition of a spot instance market, how many markets are there?
So that is a great question. I was hoping someone would ask, because right before the session, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know myself. I still don't know exactly, but at a quick look, there are 76 availability zones, right? I think there are 24 regions, and within those, there are about 76 availability zones. I can't figure out exactly how many instances there are. It wasn't like there was nowhere online where it said, and I didn't have time to query our system to see if we could pull that out. But there are roughly 40 instance types. And now within each one of those instance types, it varies. It could be anywhere between 3 or 4 sizes, or 12 or more sizes. So let's say on average, 5 sizes per instance. My rough estimate is that we're talking about 15,000 unique spot instance markets, which is a lot. It's a lot to manage, but it's like, hello everybody, this is incredible. We have the ability to find markets which are going to be unaffected, like we saw before. Within the exact same region, there was one data center that was totally unaffected. There were no replacements. So there's always going to be availability. You just have to know where to look for it.
Okay, excellent. We've got a question that might follow on nicely from that. What's each spot instance market actually? Does EC2 have many separate spot markets, or are those the availability zones from the last slides? So I think you kind of almost covered that anyway.
So yeah, I mean, if you want, I can go back. Hang on, just let me know. Just to go back to what's visualized. It's really just these 4 things. Can you see my screen? Instance size, instance family. Yeah, these are the 4 characteristics of a spot instance market.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We have another question. Do I understand correctly that you can also use my reserved instance commitments?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So we are completely aware of the reserved instances the commitments that you have. And not only do we know that you have it on paper, we'll know if it's used or not used. We'll we'll know if it's an available reservation. So in that case, we definitely will prioritize using the reserved instance before launching any additional spot instances or on-demand instances, obviously. Although the on-demand instance would automatically be subsumed into the RI. So the point is, we would not go and run a spot instance when we know for a particular, again, for a specific instance, size, region,
Sure.
availability zone, pretty specific, if we know that you have a reservation for the same. And that ability, and this is exactly what I was talking about before, this ability that we have allows us to make sure that you're always being optimal in how you're spending in the cloud. We don't want there to be any waste whatsoever.
Okay, we have another question. Can custom build AMIs use spot instances?
Yes, spot instances can leverage any custom AMIs. They behave exactly the same way as on-demand and reserved instances. I want to stress, spot instances, again, it's a financial, again, they're obviously more than just financial, but in terms of the actual machine, you're getting the exact same machine as you would if it was on-demand or reserved. No difference.
Okay, and we've had someone join fairly late, and I just want to ask a very quick question. Does Spot.io work with AWS spot instances? They said. Sorry for the silly question. They arrived late.
Yes, Spot.io does work with AWS spot instances. That is, I would say that's our bread and butter. We help companies that want to save a lot of money using spot instances, but want a turnkey solution to make it much easier and much safer, as we saw a few slides back with one of the leading sports apparel companies tried doing it themselves and could not. That's what we do.
Okay, I think we've got time for one final question.
Sure.
Do cloud companies face any financial crunch related to running their services?
So again, do they themselves, like you're talking about AWS, Azure, and Google?
I imagine it's the actual cloud vendor themselves.
Yeah. Again, I don't know. Potentially, they are facing some tough times. My guess is that Amazon and Azure and Google Cloud are experiencing a boom in business because they are charging for their compute, and everyone is using compute. Companies like Zoom, who we saw before,
Sure.
they don't run exclusively on Amazon, but they do run on Amazon. I'm sure they have, I don't even want to, thousands or tens of thousands of servers. I don't even know. I have no idea how many, but they definitely are running on Amazon, and they're experiencing a surge. Where they get the money to pay Amazon from, I have no idea, but they're definitely paying Amazon. So my guess is, again, and I'm assuming that this question is specific to COVID-19. I'm not sure, what it's like overall, if they're having a big margin or not, but I think they're killing it.
Yeah, I assume it's to COVID-19 effects. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Zev, and answering those questions that have come in from the audience and the listeners. I just want to say again, thank you all for joining us today, and again, a special thanks to you, Zev, for just highlighting how AWS compute resources are being impacted and the effect that it's having upon different businesses. And when you're talking about those example companies earlier, it really highlighted the importance of understanding how the spot market is fluctuating and how it can be used to save you money, but also how relying on spot instances alone can cause unexpected results of potentially taking down an entire environment. So thanks again for some great insights. As a reminder to everyone, you will receive the recording via email as soon as it's available. And don't forget to check out all our other webinars, which you can find on our website at cloudacademy.com. So thank you again, Zev, and that's everything from me.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Good luck, everybody.